Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversations are pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Did you bring your thinking caps? Because it's time to put them on. Because the conversation starts now. Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot. The place where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. And today, our amazing guest is Shelley Settles. We were just talking about in the green room just what we do for self-care, what we do to make ourselves feel good, maybe even comfort food, get in the jacuzzi. But what are you doing, Brains, to make yourself feel good? What are you doing to make yourself more positive? Shelley is going to give us some great inspiration, some great insight about what she's doing, what she's pouring into people around the world, and we're going to envelop it all. Thank you so much for joining me, Shelley. How are you?
I am fabulous, and I have looked forward to being here. So
Oh,
nice to be here with your audience.
well, I love to be here with you. Tell my brains a little bit about you and how you show up in the world.
Okay. Well, I consider myself a mentor for breakthrough. I work largely with Christians, but that's just because that's been my story. And
Yep.
anytime that I come across a Christian, that's a motley description because they believe everything all over the place. And there's some common things here, but one of the common things disturbs me in that's they've got a distorted view of who they are. And they say God is love, but they don't feel at the heart level that God is love. So while I work with atheists and Muslims and Jews and Christians and gays and lesbians, it doesn't matter to me. I want them to hear the message that God loves them perfectly and he's not holding their wrongs against him. He's not keeping any record of wrongs. So that's kind of my heartbeat is you're loved. And any religious idea that speaks otherwise to you is a distorted idea that is going to hold you back. Like I say,
Absolutely.
I mentioned working with a lot of Christians, and April, interrupt me if you want to, because this message is not for Christians or believers only, but there's a lot of frustration out there. Because on one hand, they'll go to church and they'll hear that they're supposed to be blessed and live this abundant life. And
I'm not going to stop anybody. I'm not going to impede their mobility when it comes to a higher source. You know, they can call it God, Jesus, Buddha, Allah. You know, I respect all of that. I am a fan of Jesus Christ. That's where I found my redemption. But people don't want to identify. It's like a dirty word. You know, people do misdeeds under the name of God all the time, every day. They've killed people, they've slaughtered people,
all the time.
they all this kind of stuff in the name of God. But what is love, Shelley? Break it down for me. What is love?
Well, First Corinthians called the love chapter, and I don't know if I told you this, but I'm a licensed ordained motorcycle riding minister. I've
Mm-hmm.
traveled all through the United States and down through Latin America. Maybe if there's time we can talk about that. But First Corinthians, or the love chapter, says that love keeps no record of wrong, and that's where the Christians have missed it. And I am one. Um, but we any scripture interpretation that suggests that God is anything other than love, light, or consuming fire, the three things that he says about himself, is a distorted view. And when we have that distorted view, whether we don't believe in God because we've rejected the God that the Christians have presented to them, or whether we were raised in another home, God still loves us unconditionally, and he knows right where we're at. So my heartbeat is to bring that message of love to the world, because in the Christian church, which is really all I can speak to, because again, that's who I represent, who I am, even though I consider myself fairly non-traditional. Whenever we have that distorted view of who God is or who we are, then we close ourselves off to that abundant life that he came to give. And we're very frustrated lot, because we'll go to church and we're here that we're supposed to be abundant. We're supposed to be blessed. We're blessed to be a blessing to other people, and yet our divorce rates are the same as out in the world. Our hospitalizations are the same. You know, Thoreau said that the mass of men live lives of quiet desperation, and I see that a lot in the church. It doesn't matter whether I'm preaching in a Latin American church or, you know, here in the States. It's a
But you know
pretty
what?
common message.
It is a common message, but I'm, I have to be, no pun intended, the devil's advocate here. But religion also, the way that it's taught, these different doctrines are led upon other individuals' interpretation. I'm not saying that's you. I'm sure that you're going by the text. But even going by the text, it's by your own interpretation, your own personal relationship, your own reference to that. And the world has changed so much. Revelation,
Exactly.
Revelations laid it out for us, and we're living. I never thought. I thought I would have been dead, gone 100 years. And now everything is turned topsy-turvy. Everything, the plagues, the disease, the money, the wars, uh, gender identification, woman's right to choose, all of this. And so I really believe that we are at the fifth dimension and we're going through a vortex. People don't want to create the parallel between spirituality and religion. In my opinion, religion is a set of rules and guidelines. It's like your GPS. But the ultimate destination is your spirituality and being able to connect with that higher frequency. Tell me how you do that.
Well, let me just back up a little bit by saying that my mother was raised Mormon and my father was raised Catholic, and both of them rejected the religion that they were, trained up under. And they made it a point for my sister and I to make our own choice, which sounds wonderful, but then you're kind of left out into like, okay, what is real? Well, I was in a fraternal organization. It was the one thing living out in the country that I could do with my friends. And so I just wanted to be there and do that because that's what they were doing. And this organization had different offices. And so I worked myself around the various chairs. And now I was held the office of the person who recited the prayers. I recited an opening prayer, all memorized from their text, and a closing prayer at the end of the meeting. And one day I stood up and I gave the opening prayer by memorization, and I sat down. As soon as I sat down, I heard an audible voice saying, "You pray to me, you don't even know me." And of course, I looked around, who else had heard this voice? The hair standing on the back of my neck, and I'm on stage. I can't just go collect myself. So I have to sit there all evening, kind of wide-eyed. And I stood up, and I don't even know if I said my ending prayer. I must have. But I had made a vow that I would know him, and I didn't really care what flavor of religion that came in. And so that's why I named the name of Jesus, because that's who I met. And when I got myself I opened up a phone book the next day because I had no idea what church to go to. I opened up a phone book and I closed my eyes and eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and I landed between two churches of the same denomination. So, I called one, they didn't have the time of day for me. Called the next one, and the pastor got right online and visited with me and didn't care that I was a teenager wet behind the ears. I ended up getting married in that church. Unfortunately, it was a hellfire and damnation church, so it put into me a lot of baggage that I had to spend the rest of my life, because I would read the word and I'd see one thing, and then I'd go to church and I would hear something else. And literally I thought, I'm so new to this. You must know of other scriptures that when added to my scriptures, make my scriptures not mean what I think they mean. And so I gave away all my
those scriptures are also, that weapons that are formed against you, because those are led to interpretation too. And people will throw out, when you go to church, and I love it when I go to church and the pastor gives a sermon, he'll give you a section and a verse, but you got to read the whole context. You got to read the whole story.
Exactly.
You got to put the whole recipe together. And everybody's experience with God is going to be different. Someone had told me once upon a time about, their experience with God. And then I had my own experience, which was very different. And I see people that are still very angry with God and religion because they've been tormented and beat by it. But there are so many people that walk in the light. The light can be shaded. You know, that's why I say people need to have their own interpretations. You have cults, I'm just saying. You have hellfire and brimstone churches. I get that too. You've got polygamous churches. You've got, you know, just churches with no rules and all they want to do is love God. So the church is the temple of the soul. What are you actually preaching in your coaching and how you're facilitating? Because you're going to run across opposition. You're going to come across somebody that is coming from a totally different sociological or sociological ethnic group, age, just country, language, all of that. What is your
Absolutely.
universal message outside of love? Because love is something that you got to cultivate.
You do have to cultivate, but you have to understand that you are lovable, because religion has, by and large, given a wrong message. And we can go down so many different rabbit trails. That's not my point. What I had found was that in all of my teaching of my students, mentoring, people don't feel worthy, they
Right.
don't feel loved, and they are frustrated because they see all these beautiful promises in the Bible, and then they look at their life and say, well, I don't have that. And the church will tell them, well, you're not in your Bible enough, you don't give enough, you don't, come to church. They'll give them a list of things they should do and they shouldn't do. And the more they do those things, the more frustrated they get. So I wrote a book called Christian Mindfulness. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
reversed
no,
in
yeah,
your
no, no,
view
no,
or
no.
not.
I want you to
So,
keep it still so people can see it.
okay.
It's on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon and it's on Audible. And I love
Okay.
the Audible version.
Pull it up
But the
just a little
whole
bit so we can see the whole thing. Christian mindfulness and Bible-based universal law. All right. I
the
can't see
whole
the other.
point the is how to break through spiritual strongholds and limitations to gain peace, health, and financial abundance.
Oh boy.
The whole point of the book is that Christians, because they want so hard to be accepted by the Lord, and they want so hard to, meet this list of what they should do and not do what they don't do, it's all a red herring and they're missing a lot of points. There was this big gulf between science and the church that didn't start there originally, but then grew in the Middle Ages. And if you study church history, it's like a little like sausage being made. But there are so many things that science is telling us now through quantum physics, so many things that other ancient religions and practices and mystics, have told us that would really help a lot of people if they weren't afraid of the terminology, because they use different language than we Christians might use. Well, this book talks about how those other things that can really help them, they don't need to be afraid of, because they actually appear in the Bible. And I'll show them scriptures using different words, but that say the same thing. And that's really my
Give us an example.
fair enough.
You have something dog-eared in there?
Well, I don't have any dog in there, but for years, I did not have permission to meditate because, new age, that was part of that junk I had to pull up out of myself. And it's hard because you don't realize how ingrained in you. Well, meditation is simply prayer. It's simply praying right, not a list of all the things that are wrong where you're informing God who doesn't seem to know, and you're just rehearsing the problem. Meditation is centering yourself and knowing that you're loved and visualizing what the answer is. Now, that scares some people, but it's truth, and science bears it out. That's exactly what the Bible says. Let me see if I can give you another one. The law of sowing and reaping. People misunderstand that. They think, oh, well, I got a tithe and then I will reap all this money back. I had a pastor who once said, if I could just get the money I'd sown in tithing back, I'd be happy. Because if you're not doing it with the right attitude, it profits you nothing. And it says that right out in the Bible. But people don't understand that because they're trying to live this perfect life that doesn't exist, because we're all see through the glass darkly. We're all on a path. That's why I don't mind if I'm talking to an atheist or someone from a different religion. They're just people who have a different perspective of the elephant, but we can all learn from each other. So,
well, I think
you know,
what
that's
you're doing
kind of
is
where I'm coming from.
what I think you're doing is very challenging. Okay, and
it is very challenging because I'm not accepted by those that are really.
But people are so resistant. They don't even want to give. This is the 21st century. Okay, I understand the text. I understand what Jesus did, but Jesus has evolved just like we have too. And people are trying to throw stones and turn us back, 500-600 years.
It's certainly an interesting age we live in. But if we focus on that,
it's a really challenge. But what I love about you is that you are a trailblazer and that you are really innovative. And you get on the back of a motorcycle. Tell my brains a little bit about how you like to ride, what you like to do, and what got you on the back of a bike.
Well, my husband likes to ride, and so after 6 months or so of riding behind him and staring at the back of his helmet, it's like, you know what, I want my own bike. My parents both used to ride and had their own bikes, and so anyway, we don't get away as much as we'd like to, but we have ridden all across the United States. We moved to Panama when I stopped teaching the Bible college. We moved to Panama. I worked with a little church down there, and we were down there about a year when Ken said, I miss our bikes. So we flew up, one-way ticket, and then we rode our bikes from the Albuquerque area where they were being stored back down to Boquete, Panama. Had a wonderful experience. A lot of people were, oh no, you shouldn't drive through those countries. We were protected. We had a ball, a lot of experience.
You were protected by God.
When we decided to come back,
you had the sheeting all over you before you even left. So I get that.
There you go.
So let's talk a little bit about when you are in other countries and you're proselytizing and you're talking about our good Lord. I've been in several countries where, like when I went to China, before you get your visa, you have this lecture on, we're not going to do that. But when I got there, I found so many similarities. When I got into the Forbidden City, how they meditated, a change of the vernacular, they gave a burnt offering, they sacrificed, they fast, they prayed to something, but to call it God, it just seems like, that's the wrong thing to do. And so when you're in countries like Panama, I don't know if you're bilingual. I'm sure that you speak, Spanish by now, but yeah, But when you're in there, how do you get people to trust you? And I say this with love as a Caucasian woman in a third world country that is, got different cultures and all that. How do you gain that trust?
Well, you just said it. Love is one of the universal languages. You smile, you respect people right where they're at. You let them know that you're not judging them for anything. And you tailor the message to where they're at. And there's nothing like standing at the top of one of these Mayan pyramids and, just looking out over the countryside and just transporting yourself back to different cultures and different beliefs.
You
and
feel that
all
energy.
That excites me.
Yeah. Tell me, after you heard that voice, okay, after you heard the voice of God, see, it didn't get quiet then. It really got magnified because you were introduced and you you found a calling on your heart to preach. What was your calling? What was your aha moment that says, I want to preach the gospel?
I was pretty messed up, like most of my, Christian brothers and sisters, trying to, figure out how do you do this life. And you know what? It is not that you do anything. It's just who you are. And as you begin to understand, and as the Holy Spirit changes you, we're all created in his image and his likeness. And I can tell you that if it had been the only one time that I had heard his voice, I would be quite miserable because you always want to get back there. You always want that other experience. But man, I tell you, he speaks to me in lots of different ways. He speaks to me through his word. Obviously, I've heard the audible voice of God more times than I probably ought to for my share. I remember one of these doctrinal things that I had gotten in that hellfire and brimstone denomination, that I was in Bible college years later, and they suggested something else, that, this is what we believe, that everybody's going to spend eternity somewhere. It's just a matter of where. And there's these other people over here that look at it differently, because Jesus is the giver of life, and da da da. And it was just like a throwaway comment that this professor said, and it's like I just perked up. I spent 10 years trying to figure out what he was talking about. While I was in Panama, I literally had the privilege of, I worked with this little church down there, but we had been burning the candles at both ends up here with the Bible college. And so it was just such a pleasure to spend every day with the Bible in my lap and just him, he helped me pull up a very, very deep tack rope that made me feel like I was a fraud, because this was a traditional Christian belief that I no longer could see when I read the scriptures. Because if you go back to the original languages, you will find that there are some intellectual dishonesty in the transcriptionists, because people teach what they've been taught, and there is a lot of independent thought out there.
They don't necessarily teach what they've been taught. They teach what they've been taught, and they embellish and they extract, because it's based upon their experience and how they want to be perceived, what their mindset is, what they want you to go along with. I always tell people,
a lot of our
read
church
the text. Yeah, read the text for yourself. Go into meditation. Go into fasting. Fasting will take you there quicker than anything. When you don't have, food, and you're just on a liquid diet, or you're just on water, there's something that happens to your soul, to your entire psyche, that take you to a different place. And do some sound frequency. You have to change the trajectory. Just going to church and sitting in the pew and listening to a pastor or a priest doesn't do it for me.
Not gonna do it.
But you know what else does it, though? The choir. Now, the choir might do it for me now. I love the choir. Ain't nothing like a good song. But, understanding and respecting other people's space. I can't say, like Jehovah's Witnesses. People get so uptight when they come to their door, but I don't get uptight. Because I look at it like this. Whatever their religious doctrine is, I don't follow the same one. But you're trying to bring me salvation. You're trying to bring me inner peace. You're trying to bring me calm. You're trying to help me with mental illness. They're very philanthropic too. They might be able to bring you a muffin basket. Come check on you when you're sick. Really, but people want to sick the dogs on them and cuss them out. I give them a love offering just for courage.
They do that. They feel that way because they're not that secure in
Latter-day Saints. Same thing. Seventh-day Adventists. They come, and they come with integrity, especially door to door in this time. But
that's hard.
During COVID, everybody either went to one extreme or the next. Either they were all up in God's face, begging for mercy, and oh God, don't let me dodge the bullet, this, that, and the other. Or they were totally disenchanted with the whole thing and turned evil. So the devil is busy, okay? They're in parallel. They come side by side. The devil is busy as well. How do we discern when the devil is in interference?
I probably have a non-traditional take on that. The devil doesn't have a big presence in the Old Testament. But we have adopted some Greek mythology, and Jesus talked about devils, and I'm not telling you that he didn't know what he was talking about. I'm just saying that there wasn't a real revelation of that in the Old Testament. And when someone died, everybody went to Sheol, right? And it was translated grave. Simple as that. In the New Testament, that same word that should have been translated Sheol, if you wanted some integrity, is now translated as hell or Hades. And of course, that word has all this baggage from Dante in the Middle Ages. So we've come to believe of a devil in a red suit and a pitchfork, and that he rules hell. And well,
not the devils I've seen. They don't have
no,
the tail and the pitchfork, girl. They looking just like you and me.
and they sure do.
This is
They
cute
sure
in
do.
a suit or a skirt. Oh yeah, the devil comes
They
in
sure do.
or invisible COVID. I call that the devil in disguise.
Sure.
I really, really
Well,
do.
La Satan is merely the accuser. So if you have a thought that you're unworthy, or that, you shouldn't have done that, you should have done this, and it is convicting, and it makes you feel dirty, that is a satanic thought. That's an accusing thought. That didn't mean it came from an imp on your shoulder. That didn't mean that came from someone who was demon possessed. That means it came from a wrong thought. They're eating off the tree of the good and evil. Something's good, something's bad. And there's a tree of life that gets away from all of that stuff. And that is what I have found most of my love, joy, peace, the fruit of the spirit from, when I step back from some of these ideas that aren't serving people anymore. Now, I'm not saying that the devil isn't real. I think we've all had our little tangles. But I also think that you can live above that.
I've had a 15-round bout with that sucker. And so now I'm getting ready to go to Italy. And it's been a calling to me, and it's been on my life list to go to the Vatican City. I'm not Catholic. I do honor it, but I just want to see. Because my God was a pauper. He had nappy hair. He had no shoes. He had raggedy clothes. Didn't even have a Visa card. And you go to these places, and I'm going to see such grand opulence. I'm going to see David. I'm going to see the 16th Chapel. I'm going to see, gold inlay like I've never seen before. I don't know how I feel about that, because in modern day times, I went into some of these super churches, black churches, Lali Crystal in the bathroom, I don't know how that, and the reason why I bring that up is because you also work with people with prosperity and monetizing. Is that necessary? Do you think that God wants us all to be, I think some of us, he wants us to be, not suffer, but not be after.
He said we'll always have the poor among us.
Right?
That's a fact. But that opulence that you talk about at the church is exactly the reason why my dad left the Catholic Church and didn't raise us up into that. He saw a disconnect between the people they were supposedly helping, and then all of this money going to this grandeur. Now, I don't think God minds one way or another, because remember I mentioned quantum physics earlier? I may not have my numbers exactly right, but it came out of a class I used to teach at the Bible college. Between the dark energy, dark matter, that's 96% of everything out there. We are only seeing about 4 to 5% that compose of, the car you drive, the desk you're sitting at, the picture behind me, all of the stuff that we can see. That's only 4 or 5% of the energy, dark matter, dark energy that's out there. So if you begin to understand that God is a God of abundance, does he need that many stars in the heavens? No, of course not. And of course, we're only looking at the Milky Way. There's galaxies upon galaxies and nebulas and all these fantastic things out there. Why? Because he's a God of abundance, and he doesn't mind us having abundance. Now, he minds when we're so focused on that it's all about ourselves. He said, if you ask and don't receive, I think it was James, it's because you ask amiss. Well, there are universal laws in place that will keep that from really happening. We're not Thor or Oakenshield that are sick with this gold fever underneath the mountain. But there's nothing wrong with growing and expanding and having more. When David sinned with Bathsheba, God said, I gave you all these wives. I gave you all this stuff. If you'd wanted more, you just had to ask for it. He doesn't mind any of that stuff. Abraham, very rich man. You mentioned
No,
Jesus being in
and
tattered
I get
clothes.
that. I get that. But then they're very, I think sometimes people get distracted with that. They think that there
Sure.
is an automatic given. I don't think that everyone that believes in God is supposed to have prosperity. I had a
Well, they're
man,
not going to
yeah,
because they don't understand that it's available. We are here. Let me back up just a
really,
little bit, April.
I think some people are
Here's my
born,
take.
I think some
We are
people are born
created
to
in
suffer. I really do.
we are created in God's image, right?
Right?
His image and his likeness. That's what Genesis tells us. Well, God is a creator. We create our worlds by how we believe and what we speak, right? Every time we send out vibrations, the words I'm saying don't mean anything until your brain takes them, transforms into thought pictures, and we're creating a dialogue. We're creating our life on based on what you choose to pray for, what you choose to believe. Now the problem is a lot of us don't understand that a lot of our beliefs, they were installed in us in our subconscious mind when we were in the womb and as little kids. Just like you grew up and learned English, you just absorbed it. Well, you absorbed these beliefs and these ideas from your parents and caregivers. Now Jesus said that um, we'd always have the poor among us, but we're always, think of the Beatitudes, we're always going to have the law of polarity with us, in, out, up, down, rich people, poor people. It's just a fact. But we, as creators, can choose that I'm going to owe no man anything except for love. I'm going to have a car because Jesus walked everywhere, but that's not practical in our world. Well, in a third world country, that makes you very rich. So
Well,
this
it's
idea that,
all a matter. It's all a matter of perception
sure,
and
exactly,
what is rich to you. I mean, it doesn't have to be monetary. It could be love. I mean, look at Sister Teresa.
absolutely,
Gave her life just wanted nothing else but love. Gandhi, nothing but love.
absolutely.
Martin Luther King, nothing but love. So I get that. I really get that. But I just hope that people have some sensibility and balance and understand what that richness is to them, that it doesn't have to be dollars and cents. It doesn't have to be monetized. Just the relationship with God alone, and He answers your prayers directly. You can't put a price tag on that. But you are amazing, Shelley, and I really, really appreciate your value and your wisdom and your insight. Tell my brains how to get in contact with you as well as purchase a copy of the book.
Sure. Here's the book again. And the best way to reach me is mentor4, and that's the 4 breakthrough, mentor 4 breakthrough at gmail.com. And we can just talk about their issues because, again, it could be a sense of unworthiness. It could be the fact that they're struggling all their lives, and with a few tweaks and ways to see what they really believe, they'd be surprised how different life can be. Because once we identify those things that are holding us back, then we have a prescription, the opposite.
Absolutely.
To create the lives that we really want.
And
God
Grace,
is
I'm
for
really
us.
hoping that you are turning your children on to religion and spirituality. It seems amiss. I talk to my grandchildren and they looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And God is everything. Make the introduction. Teach them the way that they should go. Thank you so much for being here on the edge with me, Shelley. You are a true gift. Brains, go in, love, like, and share at this location right here. Right here. You see it? Love, like, and share. Go and follow Shelley. I'm going to put all of her pertinent information at the back part of this interview as well as the show notes. And, pick out the word because I'm sure, again, she taught Bible college and she can really help you understand or give you a different perspective from where she's coming from. You might be able to learn something, Brains, okay? Thank you so much, Shelley. I think you're the best.
Thank you, April. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
All right. Bye, Brains.